Okay.
Death.
Dying.
Who wants to start?
How we feel. How we don't feel.
Well, I can.
Do you guys want to start about maybe like filling us in on the convo that you guys had?
I was gonna say, yeah,
yesterday.
We can start with how
like maybe start that off.
Yeah. So as we were driving back from New Hampshire, post-tattoo appointment in a little energy vortex, we were talking about. One of us saw something on social media about Twitch's suicide this week, and how that has really like rocked the entire world, as suicide tends to do. And so then we started having a conversation about like just all of the things that were coming to our mind attached to that. So, and then also wanting to open it up to a more broad conversation, because neither of us have intimate experience, I would say, with suicide. I know people, but no one who I was like very, very like intimately close to. And Dee also had said the same thing. Yeah. And then I guess also then the conversation kind of evolved into death and dying as a whole,
and like how we as a society like react to I think death in general, but specifically suicide, and how you see the way in which people respond to it. I think the biggest thing is that culturally we are very like anti death, and like I think that ties back a little bit to like the conversation that we had about like Samhain and Dia de los Muertos and like those festivals that a lot of other cultures engage in that connect with people who have passed and celebrate that, versus fear or anger or and it's not to like disclude the fact that like grief is a normal process, and not to say that people shouldn't be sad about somebody dying, but why do we react in such a way that we feel that this person has been ripped away from us, and now we no longer have that connection to them? And I think that's like there's many ways to like tackle that, I think, but I think a lot of it, because in our society and our culture, we don't have that. A lot of people don't have that spiritual connection in any way, shape, or form, whether it's a organized religion or on your own or however it may be. And so there's that fear factor. I think that like now that they're no longer physically here, they're gone. Like I don't have them anymore. I can't connect with them. I can't talk to them. They can't talk to me. And where a lot of other cultures don't see that very differently and are able to celebrate that, and yes, still grieve this person leaving, but knowing that they're still there in some way, shape, or form. So like that aspect of it, but then also into, I think, the suicide aspect of it, as to the, I think, very obvious responses that you see when somebody commits suicide is, that was selfish. How could they ever do that? They should have just reached out for help and it would have all been better, and they never would have wanted to do this. And so if you feel this way, please reach out, because we don't want this to happen to you. And so there's like that side of it. And then the other side of it,
which implies that someone is responsible for saving another person. And that if only someone had done something differently, then they could have saved them. Which lends itself to the society-wide savior complex that we have. And this excessive responsibility that we take for other people and their lives. in that we assume that we have so much control that we can change the course of someone's life, or that we even understand what they're going through and then could lessen that burden for them, or that that's our job. Like, oh, if only he had somebody to talk to, or if only they this, if only. But you, especially in a celebrity situation, like, you literally 99% of the people, I was probably 100% of the people who are commenting on this publicly have no idea anything about the actual life of this person or their support system or anything. And so then to like start that conversation where like, if only this had been different, someone could have saved them, is like putting this responsibility on other people. And why are we doing that as well?
Mm-hmm. And then the aspect that you tie into of like the stigma that is associated with suicide, and that like just like anything else of choices that we make in our lives, why is our initial reaction to somebody doing this or taking this action, why is our initial reaction of this is selfish? Because I think unless you are a person who's ever experienced that yourself or felt a certain way, that it's very hard to empathize with anybody to say that it was harder for them, like that it was an easier thing to deal with, that they
Right, like I can't fathom what it would take to take my own life.
Right, so I get right. So I guess like committing suicide would be an easy way out.
Easy way out is like very hard for me to stomach, because I can't, like, what you have, and because of our society's view on it, it is a horrific and gruesome act most of the time, because it's illegal, more or less, for you to decide that your life is over. So it's not like like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't, like, in one breath people say that like death is like terrible and tragic and it's awful, and then like the other breath is, oh, and they should have stayed around for everybody else here, and they just took the easy way out. And that just feels like absurd to me, because of what you would have to reconcile, like, you know what I mean, like to actually do the act of killing yourself and succeed in that, like the fear that you have to overcome, like, you know what I mean, like that has to be such a hard thing to do. So I don't know, there's a lot of questions we have.
There's a lot there, but I think for me personally, I have a lot on this topic, so I'm not going to make it like the Lexi show and talk at you guys for the next 2 hours, because that's not fun. But I think one of the biggest, so like for me, I've had personal experience with it. I've had family members, I've had friends, I myself, like all sorts of things. So I feel like I have a very unique perspective on this as well. But I would say 2 major points from what you guys were just talking about. The first being this like taboo subject to take your own life. So I don't know if you guys have seen, but right now, like Canada and other countries are enacting laws that basically allow doctors to sign off on somebody taking their own life. So in that way, it is no longer like an illegal thing.
Or a
I can't remember what they call it.
Horrendously violent act of
right. Basically,
sort.
like assisted suicide is essentially
Medically
what it is. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's something that they call it in Canada, and I can't remember what it is. It's like MAID or something like that, or CARE or something. But there's like, it's basically like you have to go to 2 separate doctors, and if they both agree that you can end your life, then you can medically end your life. So that's kind of something else that's going on right now, and I think that's starting to change the conversation around suicide. So there's that. Secondarily, this idea of like the taboo thing to do to end your life is, I think, stemming from a society that's deeply rooted in, you know, Christianity, Catholicism, like religion, in the framework of, you know, the Bible and the commandments and things like that. So I think some people view it as, well, you know, you're basically wasting a precious life that God gave to you. So therefore, why would you do that? Like, why do you think that you know more? Why do you think you know more about it than, you know, he does, right? So there's that. And I think too, this idea of like Dia, you know, was talking about that, you know, if essentially like if you, I had it and I lost it, but basically like, you know, if you're killing yourself, you know, then you're gone. Or like just even if you die, you're gone forever. And at least for me personally, my view on this has changed so radically in the last year that I've been on this kind of like spiritual journey. My view of death and loss is totally different than it used to be. Because I did used to be on that same kind of path where like, oh my God, I've lost them forever. I can't like ever talk to them again. I can never have a relationship with them again. Like it's done. But now it's more so changed, and I view it as like, okay, if they are gone, you know, it's okay. Like I'm kind of more in the mindset of like their soul is still around and their spirit is still here. So it's less of a like crushing blow, I think, and like the loss that I have had in my life, reframing it in that way has like drastically changed my entire outlook on death and dying. Suicide is like a whole other thing. But I mean, like for me, like I spent like the better part of my early 20s like being a wellness counselor while I was in college. And like, I mean, suicide was such a big part of my life, like suicide prevention and awareness and like talking to people about it and stuff like that was such a big thing in my life that I actually was like thinking about like getting a whole tattoo and like like it was like that intensive for me. So it's like I said, I've got so many things to say on this topic, but I'm gonna keep it brief for now because I don't want to like overshadow other people here.
I think like the Christianity piece is definitely something that came up for us.
Right. And like I think it's like, I mean, and I guess my personal experience is like the Catholicism aspect of it, or I guess Christianity as a whole, and their various interpretations of the Bible, but that it's a sin to do this. There's I think the other aspect of it in the sense of like, not that it's like illegal. I don't like necessarily think it's like illegal. Like, I mean, obviously nothing can happen to you if you've done it or tried to do it. Like, it's not that, but it's like the capitalistic side of it of like
life insurance.
Like you can't claim somebody's life insurance if you've committed suicide. And so there's like that aspect of it too. And but also like, why is that? Like, why does somebody feel like they can control the way in which somebody dies, and then determining that way is right or wrong, and whether or not somebody can receive money as a result of that? And then the Catholic side of it is like, if you did something like this, if it's a sin, you go to hell and you don't go to heaven. And so that's that thing that's ingrained into you from, you know, whatever time you are introduced to whatever organized religion that you're part of, but if you ever are. So I think there's like a lot of factors as to why it's such a, I guess, taboo or bad thing to do.
What you got going on up there, Alex?
A lot. There's just so many layers to this. Like, you have people, there are people who in their mind are suffering immensely, and so they choose to go through with, ending their own life. It's also a sensitive subject matter, and like, obviously I don't want my loved ones to go through something like that and go forward with ending their life. But you know what? I don't know. Like I might have one that will do that. I know an aunt of mine, her husband passed away and she decided to do that. And she left behind all her children, and they were some of them were young, and people were like, why would she do this to them? And also called her selfish and everything like that. And there is no way for any of us to really get inside that person's head and understand what it is that they were looking at, their perspective on what they were doing. And I agree that, like, for someone to say that it's easy or it's cowardly or anything of that nature is insensitive. And they're not being sensitive to that one individual's choice, because at the end of the day, these are choices that people are making. As unfathomable as it is for us to understand, because we're not in that person's shoes or even considering those choices. It's a layered topic. Like I wonder, in this life, the fact that that is a choice that people do take and have done. It's not new. I'm sure that this has been happening since the dawn of man, just in different ways. That God complex of like we can save everybody is crazy to me. I mean, we can't, but we can encourage. We can encourage people not to do those things. I'm sure that there's some people that might be confused, or maybe, and in those instances, of course, like there's helplines and hotlines for people who just need to talk to somebody. But at the very, very core, I'm not even 100% sure if like we truly even have a true grasp on it. And I feel like oftentimes we treat others who are going through these situations as though there's more than just something wrong with them, that there's it's almost like a disrespect to like their own cognitive abilities. I'm not sure how I'm going to word that, but it's an interesting subject. There's a lot of different reasons and a lot of different ways and a lot of different perspectives that people are going through when it comes to that. And a lot of them are things that we ourselves can't put ourselves in that mindset, because we're not making that choice.
Right. And I think yesterday you made a point.
Go ahead, Lexi.
I was just going to say very quickly, the thing for me that sticks is that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And I feel very strongly about that. I know that that's an unpopular opinion, especially right now, but I feel very strongly about the fact that it is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And even though you may be in the grips of hell, speaking from personal experience, like it does get better. It really does. And I know that sounds stupid and it's like childish almost to say something like that when people are suffering to that extent, but it is true. And I've had family that has been in that same boat that thank God are still here, but it's because of things like that. I think the biggest issue in this society is that we don't take it seriously, because it does actually help having people there that can talk to you. And maybe people might not understand where you're coming from, but a lot of times people don't actually need someone to actually understand. They just need someone there to listen. And I think right now the focus for a lot of people is like, oh, you have to be there to save them. People don't need that. A lot of the times people just need somebody to listen. And that honestly is the difference between life and death. And I think overall, we can do a much better job at just being available to listen to people without feeling like we need to solve things. Because I think that's where a lot of people get stuck with this and like, oh, well, you're selfish, or oh, we're going to save everybody. The difference is just between listening and being there if they're needed and not trying to solve something, because a lot of times people don't want you to solve it for them. They just want you to listen.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point. And I think, like, how often do we do that?
Listen.
Not often.
Not often.
Just
Not often.
Mm-hmm.
Especially
just,
not, just to listen, not to listen to
right.
solve,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Just to listen and be like, okay. Because,
Yeah.
like, what we had talked about, which I think a lot of our perspective on death and dying comes from our work in long-term care, which is obviously a very different situation.
Mm-hmm.
But what I kept coming back to is like, I'm trying to think of how I want to phrase it. I'm like, Alex, when you said about your aunt, that like everyone was like, well, how could she have left her children?
Mm-hmm.
And I think like if like we feel like that because like we know what it would feel like to leave our children, so then like that speaks to the severity of whatever she was feeling. If that can overcome your instinct as a mom to be there for your children, and then why are we required or expected to stay in what feels like an unsurmountable amount of pain, presumably, for these other people? Because that's the way it's often phrased.
And I think like one of the points that you had made yesterday, like to piggyback off of like that, to is like yes, it's a permanent solution to the current problem, but if that person feels that they can't find any way to move past that problem, say for in the example of a parent to a kid, is that kid, and I'm not saying that any kid should be without a parent, but is it almost worse to be in that situation with somebody who can't?
Or like, what if that's your thought process? What if that's you're like, I'm in such a bad place. I am in so much pain. I am a burden to my family. Like by being, you know what I mean? Like, what if that is the rationale that you think, you know what I mean? Like I'm a burden to my spouse, or by being here with my kids, I'm doing them a disservice. So like, what if their thought process could be something along those lines of like, I'm trying to do what's best for my family by removing myself from the situation because I'm not saying that that's true or right, but like, what if that's the thought process that you're having? Not like
I'm doing a disservice to them by living a
I
certain.
Because I just know that like because death is so sticky for us and like we're afraid of it and we don't talk about it, like there's a lot of like holding people here. Suicide is very different than any other form of death. So that's why I really value like what you're saying about this, Lexi, because it's making me like consider a lot of different things. Because I think what you're saying is true. And then like it does get sticky. Like what if, because my renegade rebel self wants to be like, everyone should have a choice to do whatever the fuck they want whenever the fuck they want to. And then how is it up to me to decide whether somebody stays or goes? But also in the same sense, like I'm sure there's a percentage of people who there might not be any way to reach them. But then if there are people who are in this place where like right now is just so bad, and then you do this thing,
yeah,
and
they
then it's a
need
permanent solution to a temporary problem, but now all of these avenues for medically assisted suicide are open to them, then are you know what I mean? Then like what steps are being taken? Because like from an end of life perspective, which again, when you're 95 or you have a chronic illness, like shit's a little different. But if you like, you have to even in like Vermont, where you can have medically assisted suicide, you have to be interviewed, you have to have a psych study, you have to see 750 doctors, and then when they say that you are chronically ill and you're going to die you're terminally ill, you're going to die within 6 months anyway, you can do this. You have to wait 6 months to really make sure that your life still is terrible and you're still planning on dying terminally. So it's like this, you have to jump through
process.
hoops.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
but in a case of someone who really just needs somebody to talk to and needs to go through that process of what a psych evaluation could give you and all of that, then that process would make sense and could help people.
Yeah,
I think a lot of it.
So layered. Yeah, that I mean, sorry, I was just gonna say that's why it's so layered, because I will agree that there are a lot of people, and I feel like there is a lot of people, a large portion that do need to talk to people, that do need to know that they're supported. There's a lot of people that feel lost in this world, and you know, they choose those things, right? But then there are a percentage of people that there might be terminally ill or things of that nature, that they want to have that choice to do it on their own terms. And I mean, shoot, like,
it's just so
that's
tricky,
that's their choice in a different way, right?
Right. And I think too, like what a lot of us focus on is like like obviously like a lot of people associate suicide with mental health, or you know, and not any other,
like a physical health,
right, as a physical, right, as a physical thing, or like, you know. And I think that's like, and I think obviously those are more rare cases than mental health thing, but like to say, but that's like, I can't, like, I guess kind of going back to saying like who is anyone else to decide what somebody thinks is right for them or not. And so like, I guess in the sense of like, I mean, I think a lot of the times you don't know the full story, but like if you're even like a younger person and you were diagnosed with a cancer or a terrible illness or something, and you're like, you know what, seen this happen a million times before because I'm around it, I've seen it, don't want to do it, like I want out, I don't even want to try to,
or like my
you know, like I don't want to go through this, I don't want to know what it's going to be like to decline even a little bit at some point, because this is just, you know, no. My answer is no. And so and I think in that case, like that person wouldn't be considered terminally ill at that point, because they would be, you know, they're younger, they would have the options for treatments or whatever, but they don't have that right to just say like, I don't even want to consider, you know, like, no, don't want to do it, period. They should have that option, that if that's something they don't want to experience, who are we to say that that's a wrong or poor decision? And I think,
so I think because
like,
I mean, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just telling her to because you've started talking a couple times.
Yeah,
it's okay. There's a really wicked lag whenever we record, so that's usually why I just end up sitting here. But yeah, I think so. You know, obviously, like we've, you know, you guys have talked about it a bit, but you know, this the idea of suicide is obviously multidimensional, as we all are, and it's very layered. So for me personally, like where I stand, the medical suicide, assisted suicide from like a medical perspective, in my mind, is totally different than somebody choosing to die because their mental health is suffering. And like in 2012, the stats were that like 86% of suicides in this country were from mental illness and the rest are from actual medical. So that's like an insane amount of suicides that are done by people that are suffering. And not to say that medical they aren't, but you know what I mean.
Right. But
Mhm.
right.
And I think one of the things too that, like, at least just while I've been kind of listening, that is huge in my opinion, the idea that we choose how our lives are going to go within this lifetime, right? So, from a spiritual standpoint, we choose the obstacles that we're going to go through, that we're going to face, you know, whether it's massive heartbreak, financial loss, etc. We choose each of these battles. So, on one hand, the thought of taking your life and not going through these things, and being somebody that has actually sat there and thought to myself, it would be better off for everybody involved if I wasn't here. That's a crazy thought for anybody to have. And I can tell you from personal experience, having been there, the thought process and the things that led me to that space seems so trivial now, but only because I have the foresight for it. You know, I've been through it, I've gone through it, and I've worked through these things. So having done that, now I can say like, oh, this seems very trivial now, just in my experience. And it's not to say that everybody is going to be in that type of situation, and you know, everybody just needs some talk therapy and they'll be fine, because that's definitely not the case. That's not what helped me. But I think it's something to consider that you chose a specific path for yourself, and then if you decide that you don't want to be on this path anymore, what type of life lessons are you missing out on? What type of life lessons are the people around you missing out on? And granted, they'll have other lessons now because of this other choice that you've decided to make. But ultimately, you know, I think, Mia, you said it right at the very beginning, you know, we all have these choices to make. So that's also, you know, something additional. And there was something else that I was going to say on that, but now I don't remember. So it'll come back to me at some point, I'm sure.
Because I think that, so I watched something, I don't know if you guys know who Sonia Renee Taylor is. She's like a
Sounds
brilliant
familiar.
author and speaker, and she has a book on like radical self-love and acceptance, and that's her whole like premise for all of her teachings, is like loving yourself, and that is like your whole purpose. And she put out a video on her Instagram about Twitch's suicide, and I listened to it today, and the way, I mean, her words and her like she's just like beautiful on every level, and the way I could never in a million years try to even summarize what she said. So I encourage people to go listen to it. When I post this podcast episode, I will give you a link to her page. But the way in which she spoke about it was that that sometimes losing someone is a way of breaking a cycle that you have been continually in with that person for lifetimes on lifetimes on lifetimes. And that by always coming back to the choice to love yourself, you can break that cycle. And so, like, her example was in terms of her mother. And she lost her mother. I don't know what the circumstances of losing her mother was, but she lost her mother. And so she went to a hypnotherapy session recently. And in the hypnosis, she saw a past life with her mother, and where her mother was lost more in one way or another to her. And in every past life, all past life work that she's ever done, she is always trying, her mother is always lost and she's always trying to save her mother. There's various actual relationship dynamics that shift, which as soon as she started talking about it, like hit me in my chest, because that is my Ronan, and that is our dynamic. And that is something like that Ashley and I have been working on, is that if I stop trying to save him, I can actually have him. And because there's this constant circuitous dynamic of us in every lifetime, of me trying to save him and me trying to save him and me trying to save him, now our lifetimes just start out with me thinking he's going to be gone or something terrible is going to happen, and I have to do everything in my power to try to control his existence to make sure this doesn't happen again. And then I miss out on everything because I was so focused on him leaving that I missed him being here. Which makes me feel like I'm going to die a little bit. So I'm just going to try to breathe through it. But the way she related this was that like she couldn't, so when she came out of the hypnosis, she was saying, why can't I save her? Like, why can't I ever save her? Why can't I ever save her? And the practitioner cued her in some way, and it caused her to shift the question to, why is she always getting lost? To which she eventually came up with the answer, because I am always trying to save her. And so their love is only reflected in that dynamic of, I am lost and I need your help, and I feel love when you try to save me. And so by letting her mother go and not saving her, she is breaking this cycle that has been going on since their existence together as souls, and giving her mom the opportunity to love herself, because her mom has been perpetually stuck in this cycle of seeking love outside of herself, which is why she always comes to this conclusion of being lost, because that can only be found within yourself. Which was just like mind-blowing to me, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of it, but it was an interesting conceptualization of it, I guess, for me, because I had never thought about it in terms of that. And then she was saying, like, that that dynamic of not like, because you don't love you, if you kill yourself, or if you take your life, if you remove yourself from this planet, this existence, this lifetime, then you don't love yourself, because you don't think, you know what I mean? Like there's not enough, like there's nothing worth keeping you here. And if
Right.
you truly loved yourself, then you would feel like that there's value in your existence here, and that the world wouldn't be better off without you. So then, like, how do you take a situation like this and then like shift those energetics to allow that person, like, they left, but they left to learn the lesson of loving themselves above seeking it in other people.
I mean, that's definitely, I think what's hard for like a lot of people to conceptualize about that way of putting it is, I think, because a lot of people aren't like the concept of like your past lives or your future lives or reincarnation or your belief around any of that is, once again, very different based on cultures, very different based on religion, very different based on a lot of things. And like, I know, like, for me specifically, like I wouldn't have been able to conceptualize the fact that like I had 8 million past lives that I've lived, and like this is just another one, and I'll have more, I'm sure, at some point. And so like, and I think it's like, I think that's a very good perspective to have. I just don't think a lot of people have that, because like most people just believe that like this is your one and only life to live, and you've never lived before, and you'll never live again, in whatever capacity that is, like in whatever form or person or type of, that you come, whatever.
Right.
And so I think that's like that can make it a very hard way to wrap your head around it. And like,
right. It's just like I had always thought of it,
but
like
it's
the way
definitely
that
a very
Lexi was
interesting
saying,
perspective.
Like, if you leave, then aren't you shifting this trajectory from all these other people? But what if you leaving is the plan?
And, you know, it very well could be, but I think on some level, the idea or the thought of, I don't know, it's hard because, you know, like I said, my opinion on this whole thing has changed so much. So it's like one aspect where it was like, you know, this is not that it was unforgivable. I've never thought like that. You know, I've never thought about suicide from like a religious perspective at all. But I definitely used to think like, you know, oh, if you go, like, you know, you're never going to know like what impact you could have had, you know, things like that. And I think, you know, there's something to be said for if that is your actual plan. But a lot of people aren't going to recognize that. It takes a lot of self-discovery and insight into yourself to actually recognize that that is the plan. So, you know, am I going to say nobody knows that? No, of course not. You know, maybe somebody is going to recognize like, oh yeah, you know, this is what I need to do. But I think though too, like to Dee's point, like if you're a person that believes that you don't have any other lives, that you don't believe in reincarnation, you believe in like the traditional religious perspective of you've got one life to live, it's precious, God gave it to you, etc. That almost makes it like that like doubles down on everything, because then if you're at a point where you're like, hey, this is my one and only shot here, I've got nothing else, and this is so horrible and unthinkable that I'm done. Like that almost makes it like a million times worse. And I mean, personally for me, like that's what I used to think too, because I used to be like an agnostic atheist that like there is nothing, like that's it, we just snuff out and we're done. Like but like how bleak, you know, to think
And
like that, right? And I mean
how
the
much
truth of the matter
pain.
is that's how most people
Yeah.
are.
I want to add on that, Lexi. You know, I'm thinking about, you know, there's children who do this to themselves, right? And I think most of like what we're saying is like people who are probably a bit older, and I mean that's what we hear more often is they're older folks that are doing this. But there are children who are doing this. And when it comes to that, to those young people, I think that just changes the perspective of like, I mean that's like the child, they themselves don't even realize the rest of the potential that they may have, right? And so bringing age into this whole conversation is like, how do we think about children who are doing this? Because like me thinking about it right now, I get all teary eyed because I was like, I can't even imagine the parents that go through this because their child who still does not even understand the life that they have to begin with are doing these things, are making these choices. I mean, again, it's a choice, but at the same time, do you even understand at the very least, the ramifications of that, right? Especially when they are so young.
I
I
mean,
just want
that's
to put
where I
that out
was.
there. Like,
Yeah,
dang.
that's where I was. And that's, I think, for me, why personally I feel so strongly about the reactionary situation that a lot of people find themselves in. because of where I was. So for me, like on a personal level, that's kind of where I feel. But like I said, I have family, I have friends. Like it's very there's a whole theme in this lifetime for me with personal choice to choose to die. Like it's a huge theme within this life for me. So I can see it from a bunch of different perspectives.
Because I think, because then it brings me back to which this I'm working on a book. I'm working on a couple books right now, but one book that I'm working on has been inspired by my shifts in parenting through my work with Ashley and my own work with the Akashic Record. And it is very difficult for me to embody this. I'm struggling through the mud, but it does feel right in my body if I can get my mind out of the way. And so it feels like a hard truth. But if we take radical responsibility for ourselves and we relieve ourselves of the responsibility that we feel towards others, I think that has to include our children as well.
Mm-hmm.
I know. And then if they are their own being and we are here to co-create with them, and so whatever experience we have here together is the one that they signed up for, we're, you know what I mean, everything that we do together is teaching them something, etc., etc. But if I for example, I can't control what happens to Ronan and his dad's. I can't control what happens to Ronan at daycare. If something terrible happens to Ronan, what do I learn from that situation versus what meaning do I attach to that situation based on our current societal structure? Like, he's here to live his own life's purpose, and our lives are here to intersect in whatever way that they do. And every day I make a million choices and he makes a million choices, and that is what decides our interaction. But like, it's at the end of the day, I feel that a lot of like this like real dark, twisty parent-child relationships that we've all experienced and are working our way through as adults now are because of this feeling of responsibility for these people. And if I can just do this, I can save them this. If I can just this, I can. And so, like, obviously, it's like the amount of pain is inconceivable. But then I circle back to, what am I learning from this? Or what is he teaching me through this? Or like, if like I can't control how his dad parents him. James, if you're listening to this, I'm not talking shit about your parenting. I'm just using you as an example. If I can't control, so if he says something to his dad and his dad reacts a certain way and that makes him feel some type of way, it's not my place to go to James and say, hey, why did you say this to Ronan? Or this made him feel a certain way. I feel that it's my place that if Ronan decides to share that with me, to talk about that with Ronan and say, how did that make you feel? Did you say that to your dad? Do you want to say that to your dad? Would you like to say that to your dad with me there? What is that? You know what I mean? When that happens to me, this is the way I regulate my body. But like, I am trying to learn to remove myself from that. But I think it's ingrained so deeply in us that we are responsible for everybody around us, which kind of touches on like all the stuff we talked about with Ashley last week in the terms of relationships and like why we're, you know, one for all for one shenanigans. And then, and like it like it gets to an unhealthy point where we feel like where then someone else's existence is becoming our responsibility, and then we're like harboring all of that in our body versus like just living your absolute like one true life and loving the fuck out of yourself and having that be a model for everyone around you. And then however they choose to react to that is on them. And then they make choices from there to create their one true life. And so like that's the, I don't know, that's like the theory of familial relationships I guess that we're trying to work on in our house. And so that like what you had said, Alex, kind of like brought me back to that, like and because I think that we often discount children's decisions because they're children.
Yeah, I could see that. I think I feel as though there's also a layer where our parents not, I mean, we have there's a lot of, I'm not even sure what the proper term is, but not realizing signs or things that even children might need, even within parents. I mean, our parents are not perfect, right? And not a lot of parents are not thinking about like the things that we might be thinking about, right? And so it's a muddy area also because us as a society don't even listen to each other. Even our own parents don't even listen to us. And then you have that added layer, right? But I do see the taking honest and radical responsibility, and like you're only responsible for yourself and they're responsible for themselves, right? But we teach them those foundational skills to understand.
Right.
It's a weird line to be walking.
And in doing so, you teach them that it's not my approval that matters. It's your, so in relieving yourself of that responsibility, you then teach them to rely on themselves and show them that loving themselves is the most important thing because you love yourself the most. However, that is a theory, and then the practice of it is so fucking sticky because it goes against everything that we've ever experienced and we've ever been taught and everyone around us is saying.
Yeah. And to add, like, the perceived notion of what is love, right? What kind of version of love are we exemplifying? Is that the right term? Or showing? Because we even have, even within our larger society, a distorted version of what love is. There's like 5,000 different versions, right? Like,
right.
Man, but it does come to that foundation, though. I will say that there's a lot to be said, in that foundation portion is what is love and how are we teaching it and how are we how are we becoming the example of it?
Right.
Hmm.
And what conditions are we putting on it?
Mm-hmm.
Because your parents are the first place that you experience love. And like Ashley was saying last week, it's the first place you look for love.
Mm-hmm.
So if your parents are providing conditional love to themselves or others around them,
dang, yeah.
and how much, I mean, I don't know where we got from death to parenting. I don't even know where we are.
You really
But-
deviated from that one.
This is what we do.
Well,
But then like how, shit, I think I lost it. Unconditional love. And then, I mean, because I don't know, like personally, that's like kind of villainized, at least I think in my family structure. Like I can think of a lot of times like shit has been talked in my family around my dinner table about like parents who like stand by their kids even though their kids like done something horrific.
Mm-hmm.
And like where it is like if you really unconditionally love someone, like what is that meaning? What is
A
unconditional
lot of
love?
pressure, I think. I feel. Like, but is that the only thing? Like, when we come back to the topic of you know, death and dying and things of that nature, like, is that it? Like, is it just love?
I mean, I don't know. Love feels like a lot of things. Like,
Yeah.
like I feel like our society is based in fear versus love. And that's where a lot of this stuff stems from.
Mm-hmm.
And
Would you say that the idea of choosing these things is based out of a fear?
Mm-hmm. I would.
Mm-hmm.
I would. And I mean, on one side, you could say, you know, you love yourself enough to take yourself out of the equation. I mean, you could say
It's
that.
a distortion.
But I personally feel that it's a distorted view of love, though.
And it's probably
But
not
a lot
the
of
majority
these,
of what people are going into that with. There may be some.
Yeah. But I think moreover, it's probably from fear. I mean, like I said, having been there, it's from fear. And then having known other people closely that have taken their own life, it's from fear. And you know, it's almost like for most people, I would hazard a guess that it's because you see yourself in an inescapable situation. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. You're afraid for what's next. You're afraid for what might not be next. You're afraid for like literally everything. Like at the end of the day, like that's a lot of what it comes down to is just fear.
Which is like the founding pillar of our existence. You know what I mean? Like somewhere along the way, this time we rebuilt humanity. We decided that we're going to scare the shit out of people, and that's how we're going to get them to do everything.
Yep. That'll work.
Micro fear aggression.
Oh yeah. And sometimes not even micro, just full on fear.